back, friends. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, and you're tuned into the AP Perspective, the Asia-Pacific Perspective, that is, the monthly video series where Brock West and I talk about all of the stories going on in the Asia-Pacific region. Of course, Brock West at apperspective.net. Is that right?
.net, that's
.net, all right. And usually we would be talking about a few different stories related to things going on all around the Asia-Pacific region, but for this special edition, we're going to hone in on something that's taking place in Brock West's neck of the woods very shortly, and that's, of course, the G20 that's going to be held in Brisbane. So I'm going to throw it straight to Brock so we can get right into the stories.
It's great to be back for this G20 special of the Asia-Pacific Perspective. And yes, James, as you said, it's mid-November 2014, and unfortunately, that means one thing if you live here where I do in southeast Queensland. The Group of 20 Summit is upon us, and if there's one thing we all know, you can't have a G20 party without a police state party. I'll take this one from the first article from news.com.au, the bizarre items banned from the Brisbane G20. Eggs, tin cans, model planes, surfboard, and even your pet lizard could get you into trouble in downtown Brisbane this weekend as security goes into overdrive for the G20. The city is already starting to crawl with media, delegates, and Secret Service ahead of the largest and most powerful gathering of leaders Australia has ever seen. During the event, more than 6,000 police will patrol the area in a $100 million security operation, including 1,500 brought in from other parts of Australia and New Zealand, and of course given special powers to search, arrest, and detain people for as long as they deem necessary. Large parts of the city and airport have been designated security areas for the event, with restricted access around Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centres, major hotels, and the South Bay Cultural Precinct. 900 soldiers will be deployed, with another 1,000 on standby, while large parts of the city will be locked down with military-style checkpoints, undercar cameras, mobile X-rays, and explosive detection dogs. Queensland Police Assistant Commissioner Katrina Carroll said hundreds of cameras will be watching the city around the clock, including the airport, major roads, and hovering with helicopters and drones above. It's unprecedented as to what footage we will have available to us. And James, just quickly, I wanted to give a quick flashback or look back at some of the other G20 story and developments that may have fallen down the memory hole over the last year or so. These will all, of course, be in the show notes for everyone to look into themselves. G20 leaders allocated an entire hospital wing for summit. Queensland Police used surveillance drones to combat crime ahead of G20 conference. And finally, under the category #FalseFlagWatch, Australian intelligence officials fear hacker attacks during G20 summit. So I hope everyone watching this can see how very excited I am that the world's most devious and deceptive con men and women have chosen little old Brisbane town to stage their elitist gangbang, James.
And Brisbane is not too far away from you, so what can you tell us about what you've seen on the ground so far? Is there any activity shaping up in your area?
Well, as we speak at this moment, the entire CBD of Brisbane is in total lockdown, with pretty much all businesses, homes and everything, transport being either completely disrupted or diverted. Tomorrow is a day off for those living in the affected areas. I haven't seen anything personally where I am here, as I'm about an hour and a half north of the G20 summit. But from what I've heard, that a lot of people, like residents in the restricted zones, aren't allowed to move when the misleaders' motorcades are on the move and everything like that. And the police presence is even staggering for some of the mainstream media of coverage. They kind of, unsurprisingly stood back in horror as their city has turned into the jackbooted police state town that they apparently have justified over the last year or so.
And how about protests of this? Obviously, there is going to be some protests, but what have you heard or seen about the types of protests that's going to be taking place?
From what I've read online, it's about 20 different protest groups that are going to converge mainly on the 2 days of this weekend, the Saturday and Sunday, where the official summit apparently kicks off. But already there has been anti-G20 demonstrations, public conferences, citizen journalist conferences, and workshops for concerned citizens to go and have a look at and get better informed about some of the protest movements and what's available for people who wish to demonstrate over the weekend.
So speaking of citizen journalism, I understand you're not going to be attending these protests yourself, but you talked to someone recently who is.
Yeah, that's right. As you said, I was actually planning to do the G20 this year, and also do some of my own coverage, but however, I decided against that for reasons that we will get into in the final segment of this episode. But however, I still felt it was really important to, at the very least, make everyone aware of some of the excellent, real independent media coverage that will be coming out of Brisbane over the course of the weekend. So earlier this week, I interviewed Ethan Nash from TOTTnews.com. Ethan lives in Brisbane and is going to have exclusive on-the-ground coverage of the protests and also all of the anti-G20 activities that are happening all over the city. So let's hear more about that from Ethan Nash.
We're right in the heart of Brisbane right now at the TOTT News Citizen Journalist Hub that we've established here for citizen journalists to come and report on what's happening. And I think it's important that there is a citizen journalism network within the city, one based on previous G20s, the research that I've done on previous G20s and films like Into the Fire by Dan Dix, and exposing some of the civil liberties that were suspended and violated by the police, and the mass arrests that were happening, and some of the agendas that served behind the police using the G20 as a catalyst to enforce all of these draconian measures. And that's something that the mainstream media are not going to report on.
On that note, Ethan, if there is any fellow Aussies that are concerned or want to get up and join the demonstrations and taking part in the anti-G20 movement, where can they go to find you guys this weekend?
You can head to tottnews.com, and the People's Convergence article has a list of all the events that we're going to be at. But for the full list of programs for the 3 days, you can head to Briscan, that's BRISCAN, briscan.net.au. They're the community collective that is organising the People's Summit, and there's a whole range of workshops happening from here to Friday. There's the Citizen Journalist Media Centre in the city, and get in touch with tottnews.com. We've got the Australian Roundtable podcast. We're going to be broadcasting live Friday, Saturday and Sunday at the moment, hopefully, just to discuss what's been happening during the G20 and some of the involvements throughout the week. So if you want to get involved, get in touch with TOTT News at hushmail.com, and we'd like to network with you and meet up with you and really collaborate to try and make the best coverage that we can to combat the mainstream media, because you're not going to see what's really happening from there, and you're not going to see some of the alternative viewpoints and discussions that are vital to us as a society through that. So yeah, definitely just head to the website and get in contact, and if you want to get involved, we're more than happy to work with you.
So yeah, James, I really encourage everyone, as Ethan said, especially those here in Australia who are planning on going to the G20, to be smart, to be prepared for some of the police tactics that are going to be used against them. There's the obvious ones of sound cannons and tear gas that they have said they will use, but in my opinion, the most insidious tactic is that of agent provocateurs. I know we've spoken about this in the past, but for those who don't know, basically plainclothes police officers infiltrate demonstrations and protests, usually peaceful ones, and these officers have been caught in the past instigating and starting violent acts, which then, of course, leads to the possibility of things getting out of hand within the larger protest group, which then gives, of course, the rest of the security forces the green light to use all of these fancy toys and gadgets and powers that they've been granted over the summit. So I know it's been said and talked about a lot, but I just hope everyone who is going to be demonstrating there this weekend keeps their wits. And hey, if you do see any strange or suspicious characters while you're demonstrating, why not conduct your own form of surveillance? As the camera tends to be the best and only form of defence against these type of jackbooted thuggery. So with that said, my hat's off to Ethan and everyone flying the flag for the real independent media here down under. The full interview that I had with Ethan Nash will, of course, be available at apperspective.net at a later date. So, yeah, anything you want to add to that, James?
Well, I just want to stress what an important point that is, that people have to be very aware of all of the various tactics that are used to disrupt these protests, especially, of course, agent provocateurs. And if people want some examples of, or an example at any rate, of how that was successfully diffused back in Montebello in 2007, I'll put in a link in the show notes to the video of the protesters confronting the black masked armed thugs who are carrying rocks towards the police line, who they identified as undercover police, and who were then arrested and later admitted to be undercover police who were threatening the police line. Why would they do that? Oh yeah, so they could justify the crackdown. That was successfully diffused because the protesters stood up and wouldn't let these people even approach the police line and called them out for what they were and threatened to unmask them. That was a successful example, but there was a lot of protesters against only 2 masked men. When the big team of black masked black bloc show up and start rampaging with the police watching as nothing happens, I think that's the point at which you have to be smart and probably get out of there before the crackdown comes down, because it's unlikely you're going to be able to stop all of that. But again, surveillance, another important point of all of this, because something that emerged, for example, at the 2010 G20 in Toronto, a lot of the footage was used to later discover some of the undoubtedly, again, undercover cops working with the cops and trying to get the crackdown going in Toronto. So 2 very important points there that people should keep in mind if they're going to be attending this G20 protest or any protest of this sort.
That's exactly right, James. And of course, we've had ad nauseum here in the corporate mainstream media telling everyone to be wary of black bloc protesters and how they're going to disrupt everything. And of course, even today, I tweeted out just before, there was a nice little hit piece from the Brisbane Times saying that although there's no specific evidence, a lone wolf terrorist attack is possible at the G20. So just keep your wits about you if you are planning a protest. Look after each other and be safe. That's, I guess, the softest way and politest way we can say look after each other out there. So, James, with all that said, for our third and final segment today, we're not going to source from any articles or any videos this time. I just wanted to throw open a bit of a discussion, basically about should we even care about the G20? It's something I've been torn between over the last few months as the build-up continued. And on the one hand, of course, it's always vital and important to resist and make known to the world's misleaders exactly how much we disapprove of their policies and of their politics, and continue to expose them at every opportunity. But on the other hand, I just wonder if these type of events merely serve as a big, shiny, expensive display of state power and not much else. So are we voluntarily playing their game by obsessing and focusing on so much of these type of events? It's well documented that the real global players always prefer the cloak of secrecy to further their agendas. And of course, we all know that virtually every head of state is merely that, a replaceable talking head that will be discarded when their 4 or 8 years is up. So my question to you, James, is G20, an important geopolitical event that should be opposed and exposed at every turn, or a giant distraction to keep us from focusing on the real issues?
It's a good question. How about both? There's a little bit of both in there because I think real things do happen at the G20, but I think that the police state porn that is rolled out, you called it a police state party earlier, I think that's a pretty apt way of putting it, is clearly part of the agenda. That's clearly why they hold it in these downtown cores of various major cities, because they want this type of protest and they want the coverage to be about the protest rather than about what's actually being decided on. I mean, let's go back to that G20 summit in Toronto. Because of the work of Dan Dix and others like him with the excellent Into the Fire documentary about what went on in G20 Toronto, we know about the protests and what was happening outside and the flaming police car and all of that, the kind of iconic imagery of G20 Toronto. But is there anyone, absolutely anyone out there that can tell me a single policy decision that came out of G20 Toronto? Probably not. No one knows what actually went on. No one cares. Everything is about the protest. Everything is about the crackdown, the police crackdown. It's part of a dialectic, again, to get us caught up in that us versus police sort of thing, rather than concentrating on what's actually going on. So I think, in contrast to that, we can look at some successful examples of events like these that have been shut down because of protest. The Battle of Seattle was kind of the iconic one 15 years ago. The Montebello protests and other protests against the SPP did derail that process and definitely delayed the North American Union agenda. So there are good things that can come out of it, but there's a lot of examples of just these types of protests simply being protests. That's all they are. They're kind of just protests, and there's a big police state crackdown, and lots of people get arrested, and there's a big furor among the public, but it's just conditioning for us to accept the fact we're in a police state. So I agree, obsessively focusing on the protest side of things rather than on any actual policy decisions coming out of it is probably not just useless, but counterproductive, because ultimately it puts us in the wrong context, and so I'm wary about this. At the same time, I'm not discouraging people if they think that going out there and protesting is going to be fruitful for them. I'm not saying don't do it. Why would you listen to me even if I did? But personally, I just don't think it's really going to be effective. And I think the most effective thing we can do is to know more about the things that they're actually doing, rather than simply concentrating on the crackdown that's going to come as a result of this.
Yeah, exactly right. I think one of the things I'm trying to incorporate and introduce into my own life and my family's life is to kind of make the state more and more irrelevant in my own personal life, my day-to-day life. Of course, we are all steeped in a certain kind of system that, of course, we all want to dismantle and change and do everything over the course of the next generations. But right now, today, I know that's also the reason that I'm not really going to the G20 this year, even though it is literally just down the road. I just don't feel how fruitful or how impactful it will be for me to, well, no, Obama's got to go, and once again, it's not discouraging people to do that. If you want to do that, more power to you. But I don't know. I think there's other ways and other maybe more subversive ways to kind of counteract the influence and the power of the state.
If you spent the day planting a garden, I think it would probably be more fruitfully used than going and waving a placard. But hey, again, that's just us. All right, again, there is going to be developments here, and obviously you'll be covering them. Ethan at TOTT News will be covering them, so I hope people will check that out. Obviously, links in the show notes. Obviously, people can continue to follow you at apperspective.net. And obviously, I'm in a tizzy trying to get ready for my trip to Europe next week. So again, not much coming from the Corbett Report over the next week or two. I'll be back near the end of November. And hopefully, again, we'll be able to follow up with an update version of AP Perspective next month. So Brock, thank you again for your time.
I appreciate it, James. Talk to you next month, mate. Bye-bye.